Mark wiped the sweat from his brow as he tightened a bolt on the elevator's machinery. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the skyscraper's maintenance room, casting long shadows across the walls. It was another ordinary day, filled with ordinary tasks. He had grown used to routine, fixing broken panels, replacing worn-out parts, and making sure the elevators ran smoothly for the thousands of people who relied on them every day. For Mark, every job wasn't just work, it was a responsibility. He had to provide for his daughter Emma, who depended on him completely. Emma was 8 years old, bright and full of curiosity. She always asked questions about the building, about the people, and about the machines. Sometimes she would follow him to work on weekends, but today she was at school. Mark liked it that way. He could focus on his work and worry less about accidents when he wasn't distracted. But even with all his careful attention, he knew that accidents could happen at any moment. As he finished adjusting the last panel, a distant alarm echoed through the hallways. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, more urgent. Mark's instincts kicked in immediately. Alarms didn't sound unless something was seriously wrong. He grabbed his toolkit and ran toward the source of the sound. The hallways smelled faintly of smoke, a warning that made his stomach tighten. At the far end of the corridor, a small crowd had gathered, their faces pale and tense. Mark pushed through them and saw the elevator doors shaking. Smoke poured out from the narrow gap, curling into the ceiling like a living thing. Flames licked the edges of the doors, growing higher with every second. And trapped inside was Lila, the daughter of the CEO. She was pressed against the glass panel of the elevator door, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Someone call the fire department," a voice shouted from the crowd, but Mark didn't wait. He didn't need to be told what to do. His heart pounded, his mind raced, but his hands moved with precision. He pried at the elevator doors, testing the lock. The metal was hot, scorching his fingers even through his gloves, but he ignored the pain. "Hang on," he yelled, his voice steady despite the chaos. Lila looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope. Time slowed as he worked, sweat dripping down his forehead, the heat of the flames growing unbearable. He felt the metal under his hands begin to burn him, but he pressed on. Every second counted. Finally, with a loud groan, the doors gave way. Mark pulled Lila out, shielding her with his body as the fire roared inside the elevator. He stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold, but kept hold of her. Smoke stung his eyes, and his gloves had begun to melt, leaving his skin raw and red. Still, he refused to let go. People around them scrambled to safety, some calling for help, others simply frozen in shock. Mark dragged Lila down the hallway away from the flames. His lungs burned from the smoke, his hands screamed in pain, but he didn't stop. He reached the exit and stumbled into the sunlight, gasping for air. Lila clung to him, trembling but alive. Paramedics arrived moments later, taking over. They carried Mark and Lila to stretchers, checking their vitals and treating the burns. Mark's hands were badly injured, blistered and blackened in places. He winced as they wrapped them in bandages, knowing that recovery would be long and painful. But he didn't regret it. Lila was safe, and that was all that mattered. The news spread quickly through the building and beyond. By midday, Mark had become a hero. The CEO himself arrived at the hospital, thanking him personally. Lila, though still shaken, managed a small smile and a whispered "thank you." Mark smiled back, his hands throbbing, his body exhausted, but his heart full. Back at home, Mark struggled to complete even simple tasks. Making breakfast for Emma, tying her shoes, even opening a door was painful. But he refused to let her see him give up. He wanted her to know that courage and responsibility weren't about comfort. They were about doing what was right, even when it hurt. Emma noticed her father's bandaged hands and frowned. "Did it hurt a lot, Dad?" she asked, her voice soft. Mark knelt beside her, lifting her into his arms despite the pain. "It did, Emma. But sometimes helping others means we have to be brave even if it hurts. You'll understand when you're older." Emma nodded solemnly, hugging him tightly. "You're my hero, Dad." Mark smiled despite himself. Her words warmed him more than any medicine could. He knew that no matter how difficult the road ahead would be, he had done the right thing. And that mattered more than anything else. Over the next few days, Mark adjusted to the slow pace of recovery. The burns on his hands made work impossible, and he worried about the bills piling up. But the support from the CEO and the building staff was unwavering. Small gestures like co-workers delivering meals and helping around the house reminded him that humanity often shines brightest in times of crisis. Meanwhile, Lila began to recover in her own way. She was quiet at first, almost withdrawn, but Mark noticed her looking for him whenever she came to visit the hospital. She wanted to see the man who risked everything for her, the man who had shown true courage in the face of danger. One afternoon, the CEO visited Mark at home, bringing a gift basket and words of gratitude. "You've shown remarkable bravery, Mark," he said. "And I want to make sure you and Emma are taken care of. Your courage saved my daughter's life, and that deserves more than words." Mark shook his head, feeling uncomfortable with the attention. "I didn't do it for reward. I did it because it was the right thing to do." The CEO smiled knowingly. "Sometimes doing the right thing brings its own rewards. But I insist. You deserve support, and I want to offer you a position at our company once you're ready. You have a talent for thinking quickly under pressure. That's rare." Mark considered the offer, but he couldn't make a decision yet. For now, he focused on healing, spending time with Emma and reflecting on the events of that day. He thought about how fragile life could be, how quickly things could change, and how important courage was in shaping the future. As the days passed, the story of Mark's heroism spread beyond the building. Neighbors, local news outlets, and even social media shared the tale of the single dad who had risked everything to save a child he didn't even know personally. Mark remained humble, always redirecting praise toward the importance of helping others and being brave. At home, he began to see the small victories of recovery. The blisters on his hands slowly healed, the pain diminished, and he could perform simple tasks again. Emma noticed the improvement and cheered him on, proud of her father's resilience. Late at night, after Emma had gone to bed, Mark sat by the window, staring at the city skyline. He thought about the moment in the elevator, the fear, the heat, the smoke, and realized that bravery was not just about heroic acts. It was about the choices people made every day, the risks they took to protect others, and the love that drove them forward. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. His hands would bear the scars of that day forever, a reminder of the danger he faced. But those scars were also a symbol of strength, of humanity's ability to rise above fear and uncertainty. Mark closed his eyes and allowed himself a moment of rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, and perhaps new opportunities. But one thing was certain. He would continue to face them with courage for Emma, for Lila, and for the countless people who relied on him in ways they could not even imagine. And somewhere in the city, Lila dreamed peacefully, safe because of the man who had given everything to protect her. Days passed and Mark's burned hands began to heal slowly, though the scars remained. The pain had dulled, but it served as a constant reminder of the elevator incident. Every time he looked at them, he remembered the heat, the smoke, and the fear in Lila's eyes. Even though he had saved her, the thought of what could have happened gnawed at him. He was a single father, and responsibilities weighed heavily on him, especially with Emma depending on him for everything. One afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Mark opened it to find Lila standing there, holding a small bouquet of flowers. She was still the shy, polite child he remembered, but there was a determination in her eyes.
"Hi, Mr. Mark," she said softly.
"I wanted to thank you again. For everything." Mark smiled, touched by the gesture. "You don't have to, Lila. I'm just glad you're okay." She handed him the flowers. "I wanted to, and my dad wanted me to give you this." She held out a card with her father's signature. Mark took it and read the words, "For your courage, your selflessness, and your bravery. You have a gift, Mark, and we would like to help you use it." Mark looked up, surprised. "Your father, he's serious?" Lila nodded. "Yes, he said he wants you to work with him. He thinks you could make a real difference, not just for this building, but for others too." Mark hesitated. The idea of working for the CEO's company was overwhelming. He was used to his simple life, fixing elevators, caring for Emma, and living day by day. Accepting the offer meant stepping into a world he didn't fully understand. But he also saw an opportunity, a chance to provide better for Emma, to make sure she never had to worry about their future. "I'll think about it," he said finally, placing the flowers on the table. "Thank you, Lila, for trusting me." Over the next few days, Mark spoke with the CEO, learning about the role he was being offered. It was more than just a job. It was a chance to lead the company's safety and emergency response division. He would oversee the maintenance of high-tech skyscrapers across the city, implementing systems to prevent accidents like the one that had almost claimed Lila's life. The CEO emphasized the importance of experience. Theory and technology can only do so much, he said. We need someone who understands what it's like on the ground, who knows how danger feels firsthand. That's why we need you, Mark. Mark weighed the offer carefully. It meant a steady income, benefits, and the chance to provide Emma with a stable, secure life. It also meant responsibility, long hours, and a world that was very different from his own. After much thought, he accepted. He wanted to turn his experience into something meaningful, to ensure no one else faced the same danger Lila had. His first weeks on the job were challenging. The systems were complex, the technology advanced, and the staff highly skilled. Mark often found himself frustrated, realizing that theory alone could not replace practical experience. But gradually, he learned to bridge the gap. He studied the schematics, understood the automation systems, and began introducing small, practical improvements. The team quickly noticed his dedication. Unlike others, Mark had first-hand experience with danger. He understood the panic, the heat, the fear of being trapped. He suggested new safety protocols, emergency drills, and quick response strategies. Slowly, the building began to feel safer. Meanwhile, Lila continued to visit him occasionally, curious about his work and inspired by his courage. She asked countless questions, eager to learn about how buildings could be made safer, how emergencies could be prevented, and what it took to be truly brave. Mark enjoyed explaining things to her, seeing the same spark of determination he had seen in Emma. One day, while inspecting a newly renovated skyscraper, Mark noticed a potential fault in the emergency elevator system. It was subtle, something that could easily have been overlooked by the engineers, but Mark's instincts told him it could lead to disaster. He spent hours testing, analyzing, and correcting the issue, ensuring that no one would ever be trapped as Lila had been. The CEO praised him again, this time publicly. Mark has shown that courage and experience are invaluable, he said at a company meeting. We are fortunate to have him leading our safety programs. Mark felt a sense of pride, but he also remained humble. He knew that his actions were not about recognition, they were about responsibility, about protecting people who could not protect themselves. At home, Mark noticed changes in Emma as well. She was more confident, more curious, and often asked about safety measures and emergency plans. She admired her father's dedication, and Mark realized that by embracing his new role, he was not just helping strangers, he was teaching his daughter important lessons about courage, responsibility, and compassion. One evening, after a long day at work, Mark received a call from Lila. She wanted to invite him to a small gathering her father was hosting to celebrate the improved safety systems in the city's buildings. Mark hesitated, unsure if he should attend, but Emma encouraged him. Go, Dad, you deserve it. You saved lives and people should know. At the gathering, Mark was greeted warmly by executives, engineers, and city officials. They listened intently as he explained his methods, asked questions, and shared his experiences. Mark spoke with humility but also with clarity and confidence. He showed that practical experience combined with human courage could make a world of difference. As the night drew to a close, the CEO approached Mark. You've exceeded my expectations, he said. Your bravery didn't end in the elevator. It continues every day. You've changed how we think about safety, and you've inspired all of us. Mark smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment he had never known before. I just want to make sure people are safe, he replied simply. Days later, Mark returned home, tired but fulfilled. He looked at his hands, still scarred from the burns, and realized that those marks were more than injuries. They were symbols of courage and resilience. They reminded him that a single act of bravery could change lives, not just for one person, but for many. Emma ran to him as he walked through the door. Dad, you're home! Did you help anyone today? She asked excitedly. Mark lifted her into his arms. Yes, Emma, and every day I'm going to keep helping people. That's my job now. Emma smiled proudly. You're my hero, Dad, and maybe one day I'll be brave like you too. Mark hugged her tightly, feeling a warmth that no job or recognition could ever replace. His life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. From a single father struggling to make ends meet, he had become a symbol of courage, responsibility, and human potential. In the weeks that followed, the building systems under his care never failed. Mark implemented training programs, emergency drills, and new technologies, all designed to keep people safe. Lila and her father continued to support him, but Mark remained focused on the work itself, knowing that real reward came from the lives he protected. One afternoon, as Mark walked through the city, he noticed people looking up at the skyscrapers with confidence. Families moved freely, employees worked without fear, and children played near the buildings. All of it was because of the courage and dedication of one man who refused to turn away in a moment of danger. He paused for a moment, reflecting on the journey, from the blazing elevator to the scars on his hands, from fear to responsibility. Every step had led him here. Mark realized that heroism was not about recognition or reward. It was about choosing to act, even when the odds were against you, and even when the cost was high. At home that night, Mark tucked Emma into bed. "Remember, Emma," he said softly, "courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're scared." She nodded sleepily, hugging her father's bandaged hands. "I'll remember, Dad. I'll be brave like you someday." Mark kissed her forehead and turned off the light. As he sat by the window looking at the city skyline, he knew that life would always bring challenges. But he also knew that courage, love, and determination could overcome almost anything. His burned hands, his scars, his struggles, they were all part of the story. A story of bravery, resilience, and humanity. And somewhere, high above the streets, Lila looked out from her own window, smiling softly. Safe because of Mark, inspired because of him, and forever changed by the courage of a single father who had refused to let fear decide the outcome of a life. Mark closed his eyes and let out a deep breath. Tomorrow would bring new work, new challenges, and perhaps new heroes to protect. But for now he was content. He had acted with courage. He had protected the innocent. And he had shown that humanity, even in the smallest acts, could shine brighter than any skyscraper, any technology, or any fear.